Well, how better to finish off all this series of videos that I've been doing, meeting people at reInvent, but by talking to Mr. reInvent himself, AWS Chief Evangelist, Mr. Jeff Barr. How are you?
You know, I'm doing great, Mike. We had a really amazing fall, I think, getting ready for reInvent, all the briefings with the service teams and pushing out all the blogging work, and then kind of entering into this great unknown. There was such a great team behind reInvent, figuring out how do we create a great experience for our customers. And my sense is it worked out really well. It was certainly not the same as going to Vegas and being in the middle of all this intensity, but as far as the amount of learning that took place, the amount of information transfer, I think it went across really well.
I like how I call you Mr. reInvent, but you make sure that I am fully aware that there is a large team of people doing this, not just yourself. Of course, of course.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk.
I have this thing about never taking credit for things that other people have done, and I do my absolute best to make it really clear that yes, I'm pretty well known as part of AWS, but I don't even know the size of the team. There are many, many, many folks behind the scenes that work really hard to make sure that a lot of awesome stuff happens.
For sure, for sure. Look, and we're going to talk about reInvent, and we're going to talk about AWS as well. But you and I share a common interest in Lego, and so we have to spend at least 2 minutes talking about that. Just a quick question on this point. I think you're probably, given the fact that I'm guessing that's a green screen and you're not actually sat on a rooftop somewhere. You're in your studio. I'm assuming, therefore, that if you outstretch your arm somewhere, you'd probably be able to touch a piece of Lego. Am I right?
Yeah. How about I've got a little phone stand right here.
There you go. Excellent. I'm similar.
I've got a Saturn V. I've got a Saturn V launch tower. I've got a lot of goodies.
I don't have quite that much, but I like to make sure I've got Lego somewhere in the room. I think Lego is quite a nice metaphor for cloud computing, but that's probably the discussion for an entirely different session. So yes, okay. Just wanted to make. Do you identify as an AFOL, an adult fan of Lego? You do?
For sure.
Excellent.
Yes.
And is this something that's been with you for a long, long time, or is it something you picked up later on in life?
I think it's happened multiple times. I don't know that I actually had any Lego as a child, but I remember when my children were young, and my children actually are now fully grown. My youngest is almost 26. Yeah. But when they were young, we had a lot of really goodies. And then I kind of rediscovered it as an adult. And I don't know, I really like the mix of creativity when you need creativity. And sometimes when everything in life is uncertain, when you open up a box and just go through a list of instructions and you know for sure you get the actual intended outcome, that can be incredibly reassuring sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. Yes. There's the following instructions side of Lego, and there is the building your phone holder, which presumably didn't come with instructions as well. No, excellent. Cool. All right. So yeah, we need to obviously talk about reInvent. That is the thing of the moment. To many people, I think you have been the face of reInvent because, of course, of the blog posts and all of that side of things. From your perspective, then, let's talk about what worked really well this time that obviously is different from other years.
Well, let's say when it was really clear that we were going online, I decided I was going to really just ramp up my social media. And I've been active on Twitter for a really long time. And early in the pandemic, when we're all locked down, I tried to balance out the fact that it was this great learning opportunity with the fact that it was really tough for people to be locked down and just so much hardship and just so much just like stress and confusion. And early on, I said, let me see if I can share some educational content, encourage people to use some of this time to learn a new skill. I know in Australia, there's this amazing term called upskilling. I hear it all the time from my Australian.
Is that an Australian thing? I didn't know. I figured that was global, right? Okay.
Maybe I simply heard it for the first time on a customer visit there, but it's a wonderful term. And I'm a really strong believer in the power of education to help people to improve themselves and improve their Latin life for themselves and for their families. And so I started sharing a lot of educational content and getting great feedback. And throughout the entire year, I just continued doing that. And one thing that I love about Twitter is I can watch the metrics and get this immediate sense of, was that a worthwhile tweet to do? And just last night, we had our first snowfall of the year in Seattle. And I quickly got 10 seconds worth of video and shared that. And just those little glimpses of real life, I think you have to make it really clear there's an actual person behind the scenes on social media. It's too easy to be polished and corporate, but yes, you need to just share the official news. That's part of my job. But also saying, well, I'm a real person and it snows and I go out and I do stuff around the city and I walk my dog and things like that. Those are important things too to share.
Absolutely. No, I saw that post with the snow. It's sort of been sat on my machine just while I've been, because it's quite late here and it's quite early for you. So I do appreciate you making the time, by the way. But I've had this up on my screen while I've been walking in and out of the room, seeing the snow. Yeah, it's quite different from the weather we've got here right now, and I wouldn't mind a little bit of snow if I'm honest, around Christmas time. I thought one of the good things this year, trying to look for the silver linings on a reInvent that none of us really wanted it to be like this. I guess everybody enjoys like that coming together, and socializing and networking. But I think one of the powerful things has been the ability of far more people to be involved in reInvent.
That was something that I noticed pretty early on this year. I don't know, for some reason, I started noticing amongst my Twitter followers that there's a new generation of young developers that are not from Silicon Valley and they're not from the East Coast of the US. There's a much more young global developer population emerging and kind of non-expected, non-traditional voices. And I'm like, this is super awesome. I'm so happy to see that there's the power of social media and of developer relations. A lot more people are saying this is a really interesting thing to do, and just seeing how many people all over the world signed up for reInvent, and that they didn't have to worry about the cost, the time, the fact that they maybe have to take a lot of time away from their families to travel to Las Vegas. We have to admit that's really kind of a privilege that only a few of us actually get to do, to really do that amount of travel and to do it oftentimes on the company's budget. That's not a worldwide expectation. And so seeing so many people from all across the world be able to log in and to be, as far as I'm concerned, on a just about equal footing with everybody else, I found that really, really actually a nice picture of the future.
Yeah.
And without knowing, and Andy Jassy was just asked about this yesterday, like what happens next year? And he was like, well, that's really great. I really don't know at this point, but seeing the reception, the global reception, tells me that we need to make sure that we continue to just, as we always have with reInvent, focus on, this is all about education and training and giving people skills so they can do something new and awesome.
Sure, an area very close to my heart, of course. I'm preparing myself that the next reInvent that we have, where we actually get to go somewhere, will also have an online version of it at the same time. I mean, obviously, as you said, nobody knows at the moment, but that seems to me like that would make sense. What about in terms of lessons learned, do you think, in terms of obviously it was turned around very quickly, and people might say, yeah, well, I've had months and months and months to prepare for this thing, but yes, it's reInvent. They're probably planning these things 2 years out, like they're enormous events. I think that it's a phenomenal job has happened, but clearly we've got some lessons learned. Is there anything that you're sort of hearing loud and clear that you haven't got answers for right now, but might be able to something we could address in the future?
Something I've heard from several of my colleagues is that they weren't necessarily comfortable speaking in front of a live audience. That's something that you always kind of aspire to, and then it can be a little bit scary and unnerving to jump up on that stage in front of a live audience. And a lot of them said, well, being able to do it on their own terms, often from their own home, you get to control the environment a bit more. You can imagine an audience, but you don't have to necessarily worry about that audience being there. A lot of people that maybe wouldn't have been comfortable as speakers in the traditional mode were saying, I'm actually very comfortable doing this from the comfort of my home office and feel pretty good about doing it, and delivered some really good information. So maybe that's their desired mode of communication, which is awesome, or maybe that's a stepping stone to them being ready to go live at some point.
Sure. Yeah. So that, I guess that's another benefit of opportunity to deliver the presentations in that way. I thought that the social the social element to it, of course, was always going to be lacking at an event like this. And I do wonder how we can solve that. I mean, part of it for me is by doing these videos. I mean, I've been reaching out to as many people as I can. The people that I normally reach out to at reInvent, people that I wanted to reach out to if we had have bumped into each other in the corridor. And so I'm having these conversations with people and this is in general terms now, but does it surprise you as someone in the field that we don't seem to have seen the innovation this year in sort of online communications? Like Zoom is still Zoom, and you know, all these other products, they're all just the same as they were at the beginning of the pandemic. Does that surprise you? It surprises me.
So first of all, I also miss being live and in person and getting to say hello to so many folks. And the thing that I love is that I'm just, most of my day, I'm just sitting here in my office and I'm just searching the keyboard for the right letter and I'm just pushing the buttons. That's all I'm thinking about my job. I'm just pushing the right buttons on the keyboard. And people actually like that. I mean, the content I create and that I share, it's like, wow, this is actually a really interesting situation to be in, to create goodwill from just pushing buttons on a keyboard. I think that's kind of cool. It's so interesting to get to meet people and learn a little bit about them and where they're from and what they do. And I try to get a sense of them as an audience member so that I can make sure that when I'm writing that I'm kind of specifically in a non-creepy way, think of them as my audience. As I meet somebody, I kind of take a little mental snapshot and think, okay, I'm writing specifically for this person that I've met at reInvent. So I absolutely for sure miss that. I miss the serendipitous conversations. I do tend to agree with you that the tools haven't taken some gigantic step forward as far as participation. There's a word I've used a couple times in some of my talks I've given that I call audiencing. And I need to fully define audiencing, but it's this something that the tools should do that they can't do yet to allow people to be really good audience members, whether by providing high quality feedback at scale or giving the presenter a good sense of who's in the audience and are they paying attention or not. There's something to be done there. I don't know quite what it is, but there's something that happens when you're speaking live and you see the audience and you can engage, even no matter how big they are. You can see them, you can see, are they nodding their heads? Are they excited? Are they bored? Are more people showing up? Are people slowly trickling out? Are they eagerly kind of having little side conversations with their colleagues to their sides because they find whatever you're talking about is really interesting and relevant to them? You can't get a sense that that's happening. And I miss that aspect of being a speaker at a live event. Like even as you and I are speaking and we subtly nod our heads just to say, yep, I get you, I know what's happening. There's no online equivalent of that. And yes. I think there's an app or a piece of open source code or something that audiences can use to express their live feedback.
Yes, there's enough smart people. We need to bang our heads together and come up with something here. But maybe you've got some naming for it there, and we could include that in the open source project. Go ahead.
Oh, the thing that I actually have I'm kind of a strong believer in the power of kind of like serendipity and randomness. And a lot of what I do in my life and my career is make sure that I don't filter my inputs too much, and that there's just a lot of room for meeting interesting people and for reading things that I would have just kind of stumbled upon, and that stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think this is relevant. And the human equivalent to that of just talking to interesting people, having a conversation, seeing where that goes. We don't have that when we're not walking past each other in the hallway or getting coffee together or just randomly just juxtaposed in the elevator. That's not happening. And there isn't, I haven't seen just a really interesting way to substitute for that at this point.
Yeah, No, absolutely. I was talking to, I think it was Ben Kehoe that mentioned this one, but the notion that when a session, and we were talking about reInvent particularly, when a session finishes at anything like reInvent or a summit or whatever, and you go up to the front to go and ask the speaker a question, and you hanging back, listening to the speaker talking to someone else, and then you realize that that conversation is way more interesting than the thing you were going to ask, and it's capturing the essence of that somehow.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
like that session basically is this magnet that says all of the people interested in this particular topic, please get together because you're going to benefit from knowing each other.
Yes, yeah. No, there must be a way. And look, and I need to just emphasize what you were saying before as well about that mode, I guess, you have of learning. You didn't necessarily frame it like that, but if something comes into your vision, you sort of, and I'm now describing it from my own point of view, it's like you latch onto it and you say, let's not say I don't have time for that. Let's actually unpack this. Let's dive into this. And there's a new piece of knowledge. It might not be applicable right today, but I've got a new piece of knowledge and I might be able to apply that to something in the future. That is an incredibly powerful way to learn.
The most bizarre example I've come up with yet is I somehow a few years ago ended up with a free subscription to a magazine designed for owners of heavy equipment like bulldozers and dump trucks and so forth. And there was this editorial on the first page that said, well, we have bigger and bigger and bigger dump trucks, which look awesome on the surface, and there's definitely relevant reasons for that. But then the counter argument was, well, maybe you want to own 2 or 3 smaller ones, so if the big one breaks down, you've still got some capacity. It's like, oh, this is 100% relevant to the way we build architectures in the cloud. And it was like, just the same interesting challenges show up, rather several medium-sized dump trucks than one world-class one, perhaps.
For sure, for sure. I love this. I'm just looking at I'm looking over the side of these Lego models I've got, which I've got them like the exact same model built in different ways to prove exactly that point. That's a different thing. We could talk about for hours on that particular topic alone, I think. And I'm looking at half-built robot projects that I've got here where I've dived into these things. Anyway,
I'm surrounded by those.
Yeah, it's no, I like that a lot. All right, so reInvent itself. I don't know. For me personally, and I feel like it's been bigger. I'm not talking about in terms of time, obviously, and I know it's not finished yet, but I'm kind of talking about it as though it kind of has. 3 weeks long is not really why I'm saying this. I feel like there's been more stuff. Do we have any stats on this? Have there been more announcements this year than ever before?
I actually don't tend to keep those kind of metrics because they're often shared internally, and I never quite know which ones are the public metrics and which ones we're expressing for ourselves. So there's a part of me that automatically just kind of blurs those when I see them, because rather than trying to keep them labeled in my head as this is public, this is private, there's a certain set of things I hear them and I say either it could be private, so I shouldn't share it, or it's such a timely metric that's soon to be superseded, I just don't bother to keep it. The reaction I've seen just to the breadth of our announcements was really good. Like, starting with things like instance types and the number of new instance types we launched. And I think the amount that we did to show that as we invest in the Nitro system, for example, that we continue to crank out new kinds of instance types to meet more and more kinds of customer use cases. It takes me back to the early days of the cloud, when I would describe EC2 to an audience, and somebody would say, well, yeah, I kind of get what you're saying here, Jeff, but this is just a bunch of commodity hardware with a little API around it. And we've gone so far past that, to the point where we're, if you listen to Peter DeSantis' keynote, and he talked about how we are engineering our own cement to reduce the amount of carbon that's released. So to me, it's from the ground up. We're saying we can make everything as to our liking, and to meet our commitment to the climate pledge, and to keep reducing costs and making things better, faster, more cost effective for our customers at so many different levels of the stack. We're so far beyond commodity hardware.
Yeah.
And this was a great reminder of that.
Stepped beyond a computer in someone else's data center, or someone else's computer in someone else's data center, or whatever that sticker said. Absolutely. No, okay, yeah. So anecdotally, then you get a sense that obviously there's been a lot of announcements. I don't know. For me, certainly seems like it's been bigger. Did Did you pick up on a theme? I persuaded myself that I picked up on a theme, and now I'm not so sure. When I was reading through the top announcement blog post, looking through it, trying to validate my opinion, I was like, yeah, maybe there isn't.
So I really didn't, and I generally don't get to do that because I'm so immersed in the details of individual launches and posts that I work on one at incredible detail, and I go to the next, the next, the next, and it's pretty rare to be able to step back and say, this is the pattern I've managed to observe in all those details.
Sure, fair enough. I mean, the pattern that I thought that I saw, and now I'm not so sure, but whatever, I'll say it anyway, was anomaly detection, because there was a lot of things I thought about anomaly detection. You had all the lookout services, so look out for metrics, look out for vision, and look out for equipment, which is hilariously now ingrained on my mind as look out for equipment. Monitron, DevOps and Code Guru both got, like, DevOps Guru and Code Guru got they're all kinds of like anomaly detection. Anyway, I'm just trying to validate my own research. Which
I think that's a reasonable way to look at it, and maybe to be a tiny bit more general than that would be to say, when you have a lot of data, you have this great opportunity to find interesting patterns in that data.
For sure. Now, well, yeah. Look, and so you're talking before there about all these different services. You're obviously down in the weeds of these services. I know you go deeper than the blog posts maybe suggest as well, because you have to decide what you're not going to put in a blog post. That's just as important as what goes in there. So I get that. I'm interested in your opinion on my next point here. And I know that I can't ask you for solutions for lots of reasons to do with the fact that of internal discussions, but I want to know your thoughts on this if I can. And that's to do with service spread, or what I'm calling service spread. Like this year, added a whole bunch more services to the drop down menu, which now is unified search, but whatever, you know what I mean. When I first started with AWS, that menu was tiny, not necessarily one service, but it was tiny. I have a screenshot of it somewhere, but it was tiny. And we now have lots and lots and lots of services, and increasingly we've got lots of services which do overlap each other a bit. Now, this has always happened, and I totally get why. From my own perspective anyway, 2 pizza teams and customer feedback, and we want this service, and if it makes sense, make it. So assuming that's correct. Service spread, now we've got lots of different services that do very similar things, which is fine, but is there a place maybe in the blog ecosystem to start to talk about them in relation to each other and start to explain? This is where to question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do think there is that we've had a little bit of this discussion internally. There's an internal email alias that I'm on. We've had this discussion of we have a lot of services, and it's almost like there's this continuum of services where some of the discrete points are not quite visible anymore to outsiders, and it did seem that there's an opportunity, maybe within the news blog team, to make sure that we really carefully identify all the services as a group and make it really clear what each one of them is good for in relation to the others. Now, one of the challenges that we always face as bloggers is we're never gonna say, well, this service is better in any way than the others. We have this internal model where we would never diss another service or an older version of a service. We can say the new one is effectively does some new things, but we can never really point out to like issues with previous ones, what their scope or what they addressed or the scale they could aspire to. So it is a really interesting challenge, and it probably does put a little bit of a burden on the customers to understand what these are and make a really informed decision of which one is right for them. We're definitely aware of it. I think it's something that we within the service teams and within the blogging team, we need to actually continue to do a better job of making really clear what the services are and where they stand in relationship to the others.
I guess, and for anybody who's sort of listening to this thinking, what am I talking about? A way to illustrate this would be, I think the poster child for this might be containers. Like there are lots of ways to run container workloads on AWS. They all have their benefits for certain different types of ways of doing things. Everything now from Lambda, Lightsail, ECS, EKS, and on it goes, you know, EC2 even. So, and yeah, none of them are wrong, but which one's right for a particular scenario? And I guess my concern as a sort of AWS, what did you say before? Adult fan of Lego. I mean, like AWS fan, I guess, whatever. My concern is that someone else takes that messaging on and decides that they're going to do it and doesn't necessarily align, or even just starts to do it more broadly and sort of take people away somewhere else. So I think that would be a request.
It's something we need to keep in mind. And one of the challenges, especially as we lead into reInvent, is that the entire repertoire of what we're going to launch, we have lists of what we believe is going to launch. But we have a model within the blogging team that every blog post is independent of the other posts, because we never know for sure what is going to launch. We don't know the keynotes that the launches are going to be apportioned to. And so in order to make it so that whenever Andy or Peter or Werner or any of the others make an announcement from the stage, we want to be able to hit publish on that post right away without having to do any dependency checks to say, oh, is the thing that it references, has that one launched or not? So you'll even notice within our posts, that reInvent launch posts, we do our best to not even link to detail pages and documentation and so forth. We'll go back later and put those in, but due to the way our publishing system works, we can get blog posts online in seconds, but the other content goes through a different publishing process with some queues and some non-trivial amounts of publication time that can take a longer time. So they batch that up. Sure. We are very eager to get our content out. So as soon as we hear an announcement, we make the post so that we can hit publish and go for it.
All right. So, and talking about that, live blogging. Was this the first time?
That was. It was a suggestion from one of my colleagues on the blogging team, and she brought it up.
Are they fired now?
Oh, I hope not. It was really fun. It was super fun.
Oh, it was good for us. I'm just wondering for you. Yeah.
Oh, it was a total blast. It was a really intense 3 hours. And the thing is, the intensity is one of those things you can decide for yourself how intense you'd like it to be, right? There's no metric that you have to, like, there's no quality bar you have to hit for a live blog. So you do it to the level of intensity. I happen to like these extreme experiences where you're like, you jump into something, you're like, I don't know if I can do this or not, but let me give it a shot. And I'm just going to just type my heart out for 3 hours, like listen and type. And the only actual funny mistake that I made was a call went out the day before that said, we need some people to also be on Chime to be part of Andy Jassy's studio audience. And without knowing what that would entail, I just said, sure, that sounds fun. I just like to sign up for stuff and just be a part of as many things as possible. So I signed up for that audience. And then I realized, oh, I'm also going to be live blogging. and just because I didn't know exactly what the requirement would be for the audience, that morning I quickly pulled up OBS, which I use for my video. And I recorded this 3-minute loop of me pretending to be this kind of engaged audience member, just listening and smiling and laughing and just occasionally kind of being surprised. And I figured worst comes to worst, I could just feed that in as my video stream into Chime and just be kind of a fake audience member.
Be honest, how many times have you used that since then? How many internal meetings?
Not yet, but it's one of those things where I love to have all these different tools at my disposal that you can actually put together in different ways. And one of the most fun things I've done all of this year while working from home is really learning a lot about all the different elements of doing recorded and streamed video. It's something I didn't know a whole lot about because it used to be simply go to the AWS studio and sit there and read things off the teleprompter. Now it's sit here in my home office and control the camera and the lights and the recording and the sound and fiddle with things endlessly to try to make them always just a little bit better. And it's like, there's a lot of really interesting power here that I'm actually fascinated with.
Yeah, no, I obviously sympathize a lot. I used to work in TV. I'll put that out there. So maybe I've got an easier run than some, but I've looked at your Twitter. I think it's probably Twitter pictures within, because sometimes you take a wide shot and you sort of show your desk set up there, and you've got some amazing piece of technology that I'd really like with push buttons on there, and then you've got your laptop like sat on top of 2 reams of paper, and I'm like, come on.
So the challenge I keep facing is I know I need to look at the camera, but I also like to make eye contact with whoever I'm speaking to. And I keep trying to get everything so that lines up, and I still can't. And every time I've got the news on TV, I see these speakers that are looking straight in the camera.
Yep.
And I'm like, how do they do that? It just feels weird to not actually be looking at you on screen when I'm speaking.
Well, so I was talking to Mark Nunakoven, who you'll know from previously in this series. I was talking to Mark, and after we finished recording, he swung his cameras around. He's got many cameras, and he showed me his setup. So you have a teleprompter, though. Do you have a teleprompter?
I do.
You do. So he just uses his teleprompter, and he has, instead of the text, he has, when he's on a call like this, he'll just have the other person's face, so they can be looking at their face. I haven't myself gotten around to doing that either, which is why I'm looking to you down there. But anyway, yeah, this kind of tech is pretty cool. And I guess it's exploded in recent times because we're all now at home. But yeah, it's good.
It's well knowing how to use it all. The thing that I'm finding really interesting is if you think back to the early days of Unix, and the model of Unix was all these small parts you could connect together in interesting ways. And video production is just like that, where I'm using this open source tool called OBS to generate my video, and that generates a virtual camera stream, which I'm feeding into Zoom right now. But there's all these other plugins and effects, and when you start doing green screening and compositing, it's like, this is actually stuff that was multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment and professional operators a decade or two ago. Now it's sitting here on a desktop, and anybody that is interested can download it and set it up and become pretty good at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And spend quite a lot of time doing it, but also become pretty good at it. Yes. Okay, so
I'm all for empowering things. That's what I love. When you put power in people's hands and say, here it is, and you can do this without an official class or a license or someone saying you are allowed to do this.
Yeah.
And I just always encourage people to take those things, experiment with them. I always say, like, turn all the knobs and push all the buttons, right? You want to just go through all the menus and check every option, every control, and say, hey, what's this do? And that's always been a good learning vehicle for me. For
sure. And I guess this is just a huge democratizing piece of technology where everybody go, and good stuff will bubble to the surface, and if you find yourself lower down, then you'll figure out how to make yourself better and rise up, I guess.
Yeah, and there's online searches for everything that you could possibly learn.
Yes, there's someone's already made a YouTube video about how to do it better than you're doing it, whatever it is.
When we speak about learning, I remember early in my career that, like, especially hiring developers, that you'd always think a developer had to have a computer science degree. It was like the minimum level to get into a developer job. This time we're going back 30 years plus at this point. And every so often someone would come along that was kind of self-taught, and that was kind of maybe not seen as quite an accomplishment as earning a degree. This is going back a couple decades at this point. And now I'm starting to see that so many people have totally learned on their own, and they've developed incredibly good dev skills, and they've gotten great experience by just sitting at the keyboard and being zoomed in and focused and saying, here's a thing I want to learn. I'm going to read tutorials. I'm going to watch some videos. I'm going to practice what I learned, and truly develop some worthwhile dev skills without actually going to college necessarily. And I think things have almost flipped, where when someone comes to me and the resume says, I'm totally self-taught, and here's how I did it, I'm like, this shows a lot of dedication. And the fact that they said, well, I'm going to do this without anybody forcing me to, that they impose some structure on their learning, it's like, that's a great accomplishment. I'm impressed by that, and would love to get you further into our hiring process.
It almost sounds like you're trying to do an advert for my online courses. So yes, I very much appreciate that. Yes. All right. So So looking forward to next year. What is January? Is that still reInvent 2020, or is that 2020.1 or 20? What is that? What do we call that?
Oh, I don't think we've named it. Maybe is it 2020 V2?
Yeah, part two.
I everyone's going to be pretty happy to say goodbye to 2020 is my suspicion.
Sure.
I know that I've got a tweet I need to put up pretty soon that we've got some really good S3 sessions coming up in mid-January.
Okay.
As part of reInvent Extended. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know exactly what the name.
So what should we expect? We were just expecting. I know people from the community who have got talks that are in the January session. So I know some of what's coming up from what they do. So, but it's new stuff, isn't it?
At this point, I think what we're going to do is we'll be detailing what we've already launched. I don't know that we will or won't have additional launches. Sure. Now, there's a lot of teams that have been working really hard to get something launched for reInvent. Many of those made it. A few weren't quite up to the level where they were ready to be launched. And it's possible some of those could be launched next year. I honestly haven't looked at my blogging queue for 2021 just yet, because 2020 was just busy enough. So I haven't even looked at the list to see what I've got in store for 2021.
I have the feeling like that's okay. I think you probably need a break. I mean, I think we all feel like we need a break after 3 weeks of reInvent, but for yourself in particular, yes, thank you so much for your efforts in doing the blog posts and the live blogs. For me personally, the live blogs of the keynotes have been how I've consumed the keynotes. I did watch 1 or 2 of them afterwards, but it's first thing in the morning, wake up. Obviously the keynote for me was at 3 o'clock in the morning or something. So I scroll to the bottom and I scroll all the way back to the top so I can try and relive it somehow. So yeah.
We were debating it whether we should reverse the order of the live blog, have it in reverse order while we're publishing and then reverse it afterward. And none of us actually had the energy to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you could do that, then that's probably awesome. But yeah, no, I can appreciate you not afterwards.
So I did the live blog myself, and then the remainder were all collaborative efforts, and it was actually really neat to work together with the other live bloggers to do that. And we came up with some really good ways to capture screenshots and to basically we were all together in a Slack channel, and we were each generating content and feeding images to one of our colleagues who was taking it all and putting it together into a somewhat coherent stream.
So I think I've said it before to many people that this year at reInvent happened inside of a Slack channel. So it's good that it happened for you as well. One final thing on this live blog that I didn't ask: did you have pre-prepared snippets of text from things that you thought were announced?
So I didn't do it that way. It's possible that some of the other bloggers did, but I was just listening along and just typing just as fast as I possibly could.
Much respect. I said to a colleague of mine, I'm sure that's what he knows what's in there. He's just clicking post, but no.
One of the things, Mike, that I always think about is authenticity. And I always want it to make sure that if someone were to be watching over my shoulder, that the way I do things from right here in my office is accurately represented by the way it actually appears on the outside world. And that's one of the reasons that for many years, we've always insisted if you want a blog post, we need to have access to the service before it launches. And we have to have that access. And that when I or any of the other bloggers, we say, okay, I opened the console and I did this, and I did this, and I did this. We actually did all of those things. And I tell the teams, I say, your service sounds awesome, but I don't believe a word you're telling me until I see it for myself. And it turns out that being one of those early customers has been really helpful for everybody. We get to see it as it's being put together. We get to give them some initial feedback if there's little bits of rough edges and some fine tuning. And we get to give that customer sense, because we are effectively one of the early customers, and we can give the team some feedback. Sometimes it's not usually structural feedback. It's often the labels and messages and how exactly would you like to name this, or what's the best message under this particular situation. So that authenticity of actually using the services, first it gives us a great insight into how the service actually works. It also, one thing that one of my pet things is you see a service and you hit a button that says create a new one or launch something. The documentation doesn't generally say, well, this is effectively, there's an SLA for a minute or an hour or whatever for this to happen. And the user guide doesn't often tell you an expectation of how long it will take. So simply using it. And sometimes, some of the services you hit create and there's the thing. It's ready to go right away. Others initiate some kind of a complex workflow because it's got to actually make that resource out of multiple moving parts. Knowing that, you'd never read that anywhere until you go to the blog and says, well, you hit create and then good stuff happens. So perfect opportunity to make yourself a cup of coffee or go walk the dog or whatever you might need to do.
Fair enough. Yeah. No, absolutely. Or go build a Lego set. All right. So Jeff, thank you so much. And look, that authenticity does shine through. You're very much a champion for the rest of us, I feel. So I very much get the sense that your position is, like you said, first customer for maybe majority of the services that come out of AWS, and the information you provide us is very, very gratefully received, as it has been throughout the whole of this reInvent 3 weeks. I'm assuming now that you're going to down keyboard for a bit. Once you've got out of the way all of these pesky people asking you to do interviews and talk to you about stuff, you're going to down keyboard for a bit and maybe come back in the new year.
That's the plan. We've got plenty of other things to do around here besides typing. And generally what I like to do when I down keyboard, I just like to just maybe spend an hour in the morning just taking care of the essential things and then step away. And there's plenty of other things. I've got some 3D printing stuff happening in the basement and
nice.
got some goodies and plenty of Lego to build as well.
Absolutely. Well, next year we'll have to meet up hopefully sometime and carry on this conversation and maybe do a joint build. But Jeff Barr, thank you so much for talking to me this morning for you. And yeah, look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Sounds great, Mike. Good to catch up.